Welcome to Wisdom and Knowing, Episode 1. So let's commence with science and the kind of society, the civilization we live in now. You know you live in a scientific civilization. Everything around us, everything around you is technified, technological. There are devices, medicine, etc. So how did this come to be, and what was evacuated? What was sort of released, what was left behind? There's a sense of importance about the kind of way of life you live in terms of what is not as prominent now as a result of a scientific age. So there's a German writer, for example, who refers to the coming of age, this European civilization, coming of age, becoming modern. He discusses it as demagification. Demagification. That is that superstition, the age of extreme religion, conviction, religious convictions, and so on. The occult, all that is banished. And as Werner Heisenberg, the physicist, the theoretical physicist that helped inaugurate quantum mechanics, quantum theory, refers to it as the forthcoming rational thinking. So when you engage this rational thought, you just take it to be normal. This is what everyone does, and it's what people have always done for millions of years, but this is not the case. So we take it that after Galileo, about 1700 onwards, we're stepping into a very definite dominance of this rational thinking that Heisenberg says takes over from the previous age. So in Western civilization, the previous age was one of symbology, or the rule of the symbol. People's minds thought through symbols, and that symbols were rich and intense, they were full, so they represented something fully substantial. The symbol declines, and we move to experience as the basis of knowing. And then from that, which is called the empirical, if you haven't heard of this word before, with the E-M-P, empirical, the get-up of this, empiricism, is the study, the knowing of things through experience. And that became more and more the matter of accessing the world, not through the upper chambers, like angels, spirits, mythological beings, the gods, etc., but what is knowable, phenomena that are accessed through our experience of them. So you experience, for example, a storm. A storm is an event, but it's also an experiential phenomenon. So it's both an event, a natural event with forces, elements, causation, and also an event, not just a phenomenon, for I, the observer. So experience means that I am there to witness the storm. So there is a connection between I, observer, and phenomenon, storm. So with demagification, there's a kind of emptying out of the space in between, where there is a void, there is now nothing present. No saints, angels, moon-like creatures, all those sort of mythical creatures that writers, the Bloomsbury group, would refer to, Tolkien, etc. But what the observer can make of and understand as the nature of the phenomenon. As Heisenberg outlines, the arrival of experience is the basis, empiricism, we said, and that then shifts across to the 19th century, the scientific method, and rational thought with concepts overtake just the sort of the raw quality of experience. So we begin to think more conceptually about the experiential content that was going on in the I or the observer. And that the move, therefore, from symbols to experience, from experience to the beginning of sort of laws of nature, through rational constructs, which he calls concepts, means that science achieves more and more as it turns its gaze inward and into particular realms and domains. So that we refer to as a delimitation. The scientific reason begins to say, let's make comments, observations, and measurements regarding phenomena in these domains of life, of reality, but not in those. Those we have no comment on because they are not the domains of knowledge. They are not empirical domains. They're not amenable to empirical language, empirical measurement, the creation of data, and from data the creation of facts. So theatre was left out, ceremony is left out, church is left out, ethics is left out, artwork is left out. So that in the scientific method, precision reins in then the optical gaze, it reins it in and says, only so far can we make statements which are adequately valid. And beyond that, we're not sure whether the validity applies, but what we can say more for certain is through precision. So chemical elements has its particular domain, chemistry, biology, similarly its domain. Mathematical constructs, which take off particularly in the 19th century, has its own autonomous unfolding developmental process that too has its own domain. And this Heisenberg then says that by the 19th century, this restriction or delimitation, as we have called it, leads to a more rigorous method with greater precision regarding statements of what is real, but also at the cost of a greater rigidity. So in the 19th century, the minds were more taken by the idea of matter. Matter comes more to the fore, and that matter is understood from the 1700s onwards in somewhat mechanical terms. So things that are like billiard balls impacted by other masses, billiard balls, causing kinesis, causing movement. That matter, if they're only looked into, not event and happening, the 19th century precision over matter, the precise investigation, it delimits, it narrows down, and it begins to see what is real in terms of the senses that the empirical data, the agent of empiricism, relies now on senses, the 5 senses, to make out and discern what is real. Whereas before the Renaissance, during the Renaissance, etc., in that period, the senses did not really have a monopoly. They were not so glorified. So in the rigid method for Heisenberg, in the rigid method, there's a greater precision. The method is more strict and narrowed, but there's also the privileging, the emphasizing of the role of the senses, what they play, and so that reinforced empiricism. It's a form of knowing, it's a form of investigating events in the world, phenomena in the world, based on the empirical data of the 5 senses that we each possess. And if you can observe it and take a measurement, then you rely quite heavily on matter, and so they investigated more into what is matter, particularly through chemistry, and leaving out other domains where the senses were not that applicable, that efficacious or effective.